Why not? Aaron Rodgers has been in the NFL for what feels like forever, but where will he be playing next season? To find out, we go to Mike Defabo, Steelers beat writer for The Athletic. Mike, we appreciate you taking the time to jump on with us. Rumors are that Aaron Rodgers visited the Steelers facility this weekend, but left without a contract. What else can you tell us about the partnership or potential partnership between Rodgers and the Steelers?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Aaron Rodgers came to Pittsburgh yesterday, spent about 6 hours in the city. And from what I understand, this was not necessarily a meeting that was supposed to bring the two sides together for a contract. It was more so for both of the, Aaron to talk with Mike Tomlin, to talk with General Manager Omar Khan, to speak with the offensive coordinator Arthur Smith. And so it was really for him to gather more information. And I think if we've learned anything about Aaron Rodgers over the years, dating back to the infamous darkness retreat, is that he's measured in his approach. And I think that he wants to collect all the information before making an informed decision. And I think he's going to do this on his own timeline. So, from a beat writer perspective or from a national media perspective, we all would have loved if this was tied up in a nice little bow as soon as the floodgates open on free agency, if not before that. But I think that Aaron's going to let this process play out. It's also the first time in his career that he's been a free agent. So I think he may be enjoying this process of trying to figure out where he goes next because, it started his career in a situation he didn't necessarily ask for behind Brett Favre. Then he got traded, which was not something he necessarily asked for. So this is going to be the first time that he's really the one steering the ship and making his own decisions.
Mike, you said that Aaron Rodgers is going to make this decision on his own timeline, but does it align with the Steelers' timeline? Because Cam Hayward's just like, all right, I'm tired of this. Like, what's going on? So what do you think with Pittsburgh? How long do they wait for this timeline for Aaron Rodgers before they just say, you know what, we need to move forward. We have to go on with the offseason to prepare us for the 2020, the next season for NFL?
Yeah, it's a great question because, going into free agency, the owner, Art Rooney, came out right after the year was over, and he said that his preference was to re-sign either Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. Then the general manager, Omar Khan, kind of doubled down on that at the scouting combine, and he said, yeah, I want to extend one of those guys, preferably before free agency opens, but I want to keep all options open. Now, as it turned out, publicly they framed this as a Justin versus Russ decision, but it's pretty clear that they were really just using Russell Wilson as a backup plan and as leverage. And it wouldn't have been that big of a deal if Aaron Rodgers would have made his decision one way or the other on the first Wednesday of free agency. Then you just kind of pivot, turn to Russ. But by letting this drag out, Russ, who is probably plan B at this point down the road, maybe their fourth option overall, he can't be too happy about the way that things have gone. Where initially he had to feel going into this situation that it was either him or Justin. Now you're going, if you're Russell Wilson, wait a minute, it's you didn't get Justin, then you explored Sam Darnold if nothing else. You thought about Matt Stafford, maybe offered him a contract. Now you're talking to Aaron Rodgers. Like, how far down the list do I fall? And so, Russell Wilson may not be in a position to dictate things because it sure seems like the market isn't very strong for him right now, or at least he wants to see how things play out with Aaron Rodgers first. But that's really the risk that the Steelers run in not making a decision, is assuming Aaron Rodgers does not pick the Steelers, if Russell Wilson becomes disenfranchised by the whole process and signs with someone like the New York Giants, then the Steelers may be left in this game of musical chairs without a place to sit.
Mike, another player that's new to the organization this year, DK Metcalf. What is the relationship, or what do you see the relationship between he and Pickens being like? Because both are players that demand the ball, command a lot of attention, and are they guys whose personalities can gel together both on the field and in the locker room?
Yeah, well, I'll say that DK Metcalf has, to this point, said and done all the right things publicly. Just one small example that's kind of silly, his Twitter handle, or his X handle, is DK14. But in Pittsburgh, George Pickens wears number 14. And he said, I don't want to mess with this man's legacy. He's building something with that number in Pittsburgh. I'll take number 4 instead. So, and then in the press conference, he said, I've been with talented receivers in the past. And I feel like within a receiver room, there's a give and take. Maybe there's some things I can learn from George Pickens. So right now, it's kind of in that honeymoon phase. And it's maybe a good word to use because DK just got engaged. So right now, vibes are good. But you do wonder what this means long-term for George Pickens and if it could mean the Steelers go as far as trading George Pickens. So traditionally, the Steelers would like to extend a guy like George Pickens who has produced on the field ahead of his fourth and final year of his rookie deal. But, as we know with George, there have been on and off-field antics with him. And they've been repeated to the point that Mike Tomlin came out in the middle of last year and said that it's time for George Pickens to grow up. And this is a coach that typically had defended George and in some instances gone so far as to lie on George's behalf and say things like he didn't see Pickens' eye black that had the F word in the middle of it, things like that. So, what I feel like with this situation is right now the Steelers have put themselves in a position of power where if they get the quarterback that they like and they say, we want to go for it this year and have two great receiving threats with DK and George, then they can go for it. Or if they don't get the quarterback that they want, I think that they should strongly consider moving George right now while his value is the strongest. And that might sound crazy, and you definitely would be adding question marks to a wide receiver room. But, do you really want to enter this year with George Pickens, who you're probably not going to extend? You can't really pay two receivers that kind of money. I think that other than the quarterback question, George Pickens has to be the second biggest question mark on the Steelers roster right now in the offseason.
Mike, you said the Steelers are in a position of power, and you laid out if they can get the quarterback. Obviously, you have two threats when it comes to wide receivers with Metcalf and Pickens. Do you think they're a threat in the AFC North to win that and even go beyond that and take it to another level to make a return trip to the Super Bowl out of the AFC?
Well, I'll tell you what the Steelers have to be telling themselves. And they have to be saying, look, we have the highest paid defense, and it's going to be the highest paid defense for the fourth consecutive year. Last year, they won 2 games in which the offense failed to score a touchdown based on the fact that T.J. Watt is a game-wrecking force. You've got Cam Hayward still playing at an all-pro level. Minkah Fitzpatrick is still considered, one of the better safeties in the league right now. And so, you're really supporting whoever the quarterback is with a great defense, a good to great defense. And last year they ran the ball more than, I think, 3 other teams. So, you've got a remade offensive line to play behind there. So that would be the optimistic way to look at it. Personally, I think I'm a little bit more skeptical. And I look at it and I say, even if they were to get Aaron Rodgers, even when he had Devontae Adams, in one of those 11 games, they didn't score a touchdown. And in 2 games overall, they didn't. And, he was last year the worst starting quarterback against the blitz because his mobility is declining in age and after the injury. So, I personally feel like the Steelers, if I had to predict right now, are going to finish 3rd in a very competitive AFC North. I think that the Ravens are going to be a Super Bowl contender. I think that after the Cincinnati Bengals went out and they locked up their 2-star receivers, they're going to have one of the best offenses in the league. I think that Joe Burrow is going to be an MVP candidate. And the real question there is just if they can shore up that defense that was their Achilles heel last year. And so for the Steelers, as much as in Pittsburgh they would love for them to take a step forward, I think a step back is just as likely for them this year.
We're talking with Mike Defabo, Steelers beat writer for The Athletic. Mike, now that the Steelers have made some moves, brought in DK Metcalf, potentially have a new quarterback this year, if Mike Tomlin doesn't win a postseason game, a playoff game this year, how much longer is he going to be the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah, well, that question and his approval rating are kind of 2 different things. And it's interesting because the Steelers famously have only had 3 head coaches since 1969. And their model works. I agree with their model that you should stick with your coach. And I also would agree that Mike Tomlin is a great coach. This year, interestingly, he's just 10 wins away from passing Chuck Noll for the most regular season wins in Steelers franchise history, which is incredible when you think about it because Chuck Noll is held in such esteem in Pittsburgh, mostly because of his playoff success. And that's really where Mike Tomlin gets criticized. It's been 8 years since the Steelers have won a playoff game. And, a lot of franchises say, you should be happy with 10-7. You should be happy that you're not the Jets. But Pittsburgh Steelers fans, they don't think of themselves as the Jets. And they are like, we're not the Jets. We're the Pittsburgh Steelers. We should be competing for Super Bowls year in and year out, not scratching by. So, just a couple years ago, just to answer your question more succinctly, just a couple years ago, Art Rooney handed Mike Tomlin a brand new contract extension that makes him one of the 5 highest paid coaches in the league. That contract runs through 2027. The Steelers are always very reluctant to move on from coaches, even assistant coaches who were really underperforming, like offensive coordinator Matt Canada a couple years ago. So to me, I would be very shocked if Mike Tomlin isn't the head coach through the duration of his contract, just because of the fact that the franchise holds him in high regard. They don't like paying coaches not to coach. So I think really Mike Tomlin probably has closer to a lifetime contract than he's ever going to be on the hot seat.
All right, Mike, last question for you here. Switching gears, who's winning the national title in college basketball this season? Who's your pick?
Well, I committed the cardinal sin, and I have 3 brackets right now. So I've got Duke.
No sin, Mike. No sin. We're one and the same. You need to have multiple brackets. You're all good.
Yeah, and I covered Purdue for 3 seasons and followed them to the Sweet 16 and Elite 8. I covered Michigan State when they went to the Final Four in 2019. So I am quite familiar and a big fan of college basketball. This is a great time of year. I'll say, and then my other picks were Florida, and I think I picked. I can't remember on the third one, but the most important one is my wife's family. The winner gets a pie. There's like 15 people, and there's a lot of family trash talking, and that's the one that I picked, Duke. So I got to say that Duke is my pick, or at least the one that I'm rooting for the most right now, just because
family trash talk.
Yeah.
That's always the bracket that you got to pay the most attention to.
Sure
you got to win the family one, especially when you're a sports person, Mike. Right? Like everyone always asks you sports questions, so you're supposed to be the expert. You can't be laying an egg with your bracket. So
well, that was the thing is when we were dating, my first year in the bracket, I won the pie, and so I felt like that gave me a lot of street cred. And now we've introduced a new thing that the winner gets a pie and the worst person gets pied in the face.
Oh, I like that.
Nice.
Love
the consequences.
Yeah, so we've got a little bit of spice to it this year, so it gets a little bit heated.
That's very fun. Well, best of luck to you. Hope you get the pie. Thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you again down the road.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Mike Defabo, Steelers beat writer for The Athletic.